What is going on YouTube? Carter here. Got another video for you. Edged Mindset, formerly known as Juju1313. Long story behind that. Doesn't really matter. I changed my name because I wanted to, and YouTube allows you to now. Unlike when I first came on and I signed up with my Juju1313 email, never thinking I'd make a video, and then I started making videos and it inherited that name as my channel name and I was stuck with it. And everybody was like, what's up with that name? Are you Chinese? I am not Chinese. And they're like, well, how do you have a name like Juju1313? It's a whole story about a weird band I was into and a water dragon I used to own. And then, anyways, long story. I'm Edged Mindset now. And that's just, that's what it is. We're looking at this really cool Direware Solo. Direware Solo right here. Solo classic that I just picked up. Love Direware. I'm going to dive into my history with this knife. We're going to take a look at some stuff. I don't know. We're just going to hang out and chat. First off, let me get this out of the way for those asking. Anybody that's like, hey, post a link. Where do I buy this? I'm not going to post a link. You can Google direware.com. They have an available knife section. It's going to be empty. What you can do is sign up for their newsletter. You'll get an email saying available knives are there. And then you can jump on it and buy them. Second thing, before anybody says, I'm just getting this out of the way. I'm pulling a metal complex here and just preemptively doing it. You're going to see the price tag on this. And some of you are going to be like, no way. I would never spend that on a knife. That's cool. Don't do it. I get it. No, and I don't mean that in a dick way. Like, I get it. I own a lot of expensive knives, but believe me, the cost of some of these does not escape me. And oftentimes I have like a realization where I'm like, what am I doing? Why do I have these kind of knives? I'm going to do a separate video kind of on that topic, actually. That's a good idea. I think about that a lot. And sometimes I'm like, you know what? Why am I not just into Spydercos? And I just realized I was supposed to bring down a Paramilitary 2 for size comparison, and I forgot it. So expensive it is, right? These are mid-tech, custom mid-tech productions. That's another thing that I don't even know what that means anymore. It's always been up for debate. Now it seems like nobody even cares. Like production, custom, like nobody even really cares about those designations anymore. But it is not, it's not a Spyderco. Expensive. And then the second, third, or fourth comment, whatever we're on is, I could buy a gun for that. Do it. If you need a gun, and that gun costs the same or less than this, buy that gun. By all means, if that's what you need. If you need a couch, and it costs as much as this or less, buy that couch. Buy what you need. Once all your needs are taken care of, and then you can move into the world of wants, then you get into this, right? I'm not telling people, don't buy that Geo Metro for your kid. Buy this instead. Not saying that. Get that Geo Metro first. If you need to defend your life with a firearm, get that firearm. I don't need to know about it. I understand what this costs and I know what guns cost. Two different things. Get the one that you need. And then if you have extra money, get the one that you want. And if you don't want this, don't get it. It's cool, man. It's cool. You don't need to get it. So now that that's out of the way, sorry, that was pent up for a while. I get so many of those comments. Like, I'm just going to read that comment and be like, what? You can buy an HK for the cost of this knife? No way. I had no idea. What have I been doing with my life? I've wasted all my money. I know what things cost. If that's what you need, get that. I don't. And I know people are just upset because they kind of want this, but they would never spend that kind of money. And so then they get angry at people that do. I'm going to talk about that in another video, though. I think there's some misconception about getting into higher end knives that people have. This is a world record, guys. 4 minutes in, and I have talked about nothing. I'm going to get comments about that too. I don't care. Do it. Comment, thumbs down, whatever you want to do. 4 minutes in, I have not talked about this knife. This is the Direware Solo. Now let's start. If you guys are still there. This means a lot to me. This company, or this guy. This was the first, 10, 11 years ago, this is the first knife that I ordered directly from a maker. It was a Solo. It was a Solo V2. So not quite the very first model, but close to it. Solo V2, ordered it directly from the maker in the configuration that I wanted. It had the compound grind, kind of a Tonto-ish blade, if I remember right. It was acid etched and tumbled. It had a super thick carbon fiber front scale. bronze titanium in the back. Beautiful knife. Still looks good. I went back and watched that video from forever ago. Still looks good. I wish I had it. I can't believe I sold that. Very reasonably priced at the time. So Direware came out during the whole overbuilt, beefy knife phase, which I think is somewhat coming back, at least a little bit. But it came out during that kind of original push. But what set Direware apart was they were higher quality than really anybody. Anybody at the time making knives. The tolerances, the features that you got were all super top notch, and it kind of set them apart. And they had kind of this cool spaceship type look. This is a later version, so it's a little different, but you know, the Solo still has a consistent design language. I actually have another newer Solo. Well, actually, this one's newer than that one, but this one's somewhat of a throwback, right? So this is, they call it the classic Solo. So it's a throwback to some of the older models. I'm not sure exactly what gen this is trying to be more like. I don't think it's my V2, but somewhere around there. Early gens, probably one that the maker thought was kind of somewhat the pinnacle, like where he kind of really worked out all the kinks. And then after that, it was just kind of tweaks for the sake of tweaks, would be my guess. So this is kind of a throwback to that. Full tie, beautiful knife. I have a newer version though, like a V7 or something, which has more modern features. And then even the later version has like a lock bar insert and things like that. But this is a throwback to kind of an older one. It's a beefy, thick knife, but it's heavily contoured. You can see right there. Works really, really well. And like I said, Direware was known for just really being ahead of the game in terms of quality and tolerances. Now, people have caught up, but 11 years ago, especially in the big, thick, beefy knife arena, a lot of people in this space, they were a little crude, right? They didn't fit together all that well. The lock faces would sometimes be iffy. They would be overly heavy or overly non-balanced. They would have sloppy detents. Flippers wouldn't flip. All kinds of stuff back then. But Direware really kind of did well in that arena. And the strange thing, though, is despite that, and despite the attention that this knife gets when I post it and when people see it, Direware is still pretty unknown. Like, he's been around forever. I forget his name. I was supposed to look up his name. I think it's like Eric. He's been around forever. Not that well known. A lot of people are still not familiar with Direwares. Those that are really like him, but a lot of people don't know. And he's somewhat of a recluse, right? Like, he doesn't really seem to go around to knife shows. Doesn't have a presence. He's not really out there. Like, he has an Instagram, he posts stuff, Facebook page, but that's about it. Like, he's not really in the knife community like Strider is, even today. Like, Strider's in all the major shows. They always have a booth, and they're always bringing stuff, and they got their whole team and all that stuff. But Direware just doesn't really participate. He kind of makes his knives, and then you can either order them custom from him in your configuration, or he'll do drops every few months where you can go in and buy one. And that's where I got this. Just got the email blast, boom, Direware knives are available. Pop over to the site. This is the one I wanted. He had like 5 of these or something. Snagged one, and it's really awesome. So now let's talk about the actual knife. I'm sorry, guys. I haven't shot a video in weeks now, and a little rusty all over the place. Let's take a look at the overall length. So it's a big knife, but it's not breaking records in terms of length. It's 8 3/4, so good size. Blade length is about 3.5-ish to kind of the highest point on the handle. Cutting length is 3 1/4-ish, maybe a little less if you don't count kind of this sharpened little sharpening choil here. The steel on this one is M390. My other Solo is S110V, so he uses modern steels. Can't speak to his heat treat. I'm not too sure on what that's like. Hoping it's good. I mean, I've seen his heat treat process, him post it, but in terms of what HRCs he's getting and things like that, I'm not too sure. Full titanium handle, contoured, has some cool details. The finish on this handle appears to be, I could be wrong, let me know, any knife makers out there that can identify this. Almost seems like it's an orange peel that's then been blasted over the top, because it has a texture to it that's above and beyond just sandblasting or bead blasting, but it definitely has a blasted overall finish. So It almost seems like it's an orange peel-esque finish and then blasted on top. Could be wrong. Titanium hardware, at least the pivot is titanium. Got some interesting things here. So nice, smooth, hand-finished pivot here. And then you can see that little thing right there. You're like, what is that? This knife is cool because it's very refined, well put together, but it also has these weird hand touches. There's two of them in particular. One of them is that. So he takes this pivot, he drills a hole in it, and he puts a steel piece of high gauge wire through it. And then that engages with a cutout on the inside of the scale that prevents this from spinning, right? So it's a homemade kind of way to prevent it from spinning. And you can actually see that piece sticking out here. You know, he grinds it down and polishes it, but you can still see it there. So that is kind of a homemade way to keep this from spinning so you can take it apart, which is pretty cool. The other one is his over travel protection. So there's no disc on the outside. What he does is he mills a channel on the inside of the scale here, and then he puts a hole on the width or the inside of the lock bar, and then he puts once again a high gauge piece of steel wire through there, and that is what prevents you from pushing this lock bar over too much. Pretty cool, and he's done that like since the beginning. That's kind of like his invention for the issue of over travel. The downside to that is you have no way to reduce lock bar tension if you need to. Like if you got this knife and you're like, man, this lock bar is too stiff. This is pretty stiff. Normally, you can just unscrew that disc, you can bend it out a little bit, reduce some of that tension. If you overdo it, you take it apart, bend it in a little bit, you can adjust it, right? Anybody can adjust that, kind of get it to where they want it. With this, you can't do it. You could only add to it. I guess in theory, you could try to pull that wire out and reset it. I don't know how easy that would be. I'd assume it's somewhat press fit in there. I don't think it'd be super easy. And then you run the risk of it just falling out. So wouldn't recommend it, if at all possible, not doing that. Milled pocket clip, really cool. It's big, but lightweight. A lot of milling here, gets pretty thin. And another interesting thing is it's reversible. You don't usually see that on these kind of knives, kind of more bespoke, small production, whatever you want to call it. Usually they pick their configuration and that's just, it is what it is. This one you can actually reverse. It is right hand only though. You can put that pocket clip up there. There's extra screws here, which is pretty cool. What else we got? Backspacer, titanium, I believe, unless it's aluminum. Very hand finished on the backspacer. So you can tell this is a combination of really high quality CNC or water jet machining, but then there's also pieces that are very hand done. This backspacer looks very hand done, potentially completely cut out by hand, maybe, maybe not. Maybe he does the rough cutting on laser or water jet. And then does the hand finishing on there. It's got kind of like a grind mark finish on there. The blade on this is very simple. You can see it's got a high hollow grind right there. Good and thin behind the edge, nice and sharp. Really like the blade shape. A little light for my taste. I kind of wish the blade was a little bit thicker or maybe it had less grind because it's very handle heavy. These big thick titanium slabs here, very handle heavy, but still very, very cool. Fires like a rocket. It's running on bearings, captured bearings. You can see it's got some notches here to undo the lock bar. There's no lock bar insert. However, that lock interface is money. Money. I mean, it is perfecto. The way that engages, like perfecto. Honestly, I think lock bar inserts are unneeded. I think it's a byproduct of an era where everybody was racing to do something cool and outdo each other, and they came up with it, and it was a solution to a problem that nobody really had. But in my entire knife owning career, and that includes owning a ton of knives, it includes beating the crap out of some knives, it includes having some knives for an extended period of time, it includes inheriting beat up knives, you know, that other people have beat up that have been around a long time. I have worn out exactly 0 lock bars. 0. I've never had an issue with a lock bar wearing out. Now I've had issues with lock bars just not functioning all that well, slipping, needing to be adjusted. But in terms of having a lock bar that did work and then I just open it so much that it wears out, never happened. I do believe that is something, I mean, that did happen, right? Striders were known for that, especially early Striders where they did the radius lock face. But that's kind of unique to them. They had a very limited engagement on those two pieces, and they would kind of wear out. But if you do a lock face correctly, like this, where it actually engages on the same plane and you have a lot of contact, this lock bar isn't going to wear out. Like, it's never going to wear out. It's not worth, in my opinion. Now, the latest Solos do have lock bar inserts, I believe. But in my opinion, it's not worth the extra pieces, right? I'm going to get a little theoretical here. Let's say you have a knife and the lock bar, you're in a dire situation, hence the Direware. You're in a dire situation, you need to use your knife. Lock bar wears out and you've got lock rock. It doesn't matter, right? It's not going to fail. It makes a noise. It's not going to fail. It's still locked. You can still use it. It's still functional. It is still a locking knife. Now, let's say you have a lock bar insert and that screw fails and the lock bar insert falls out. Well, now you have a non-functional locking knife. You can still use it, right? Hold the blade open, use it, whatever. But it's no longer a locking knife. It is completely failed in terms of being a locking knife. So in my opinion, it's a solution to a problem that we don't really need, right? That's my opinion anyways. Yours may vary. Plus, it's kind of just unsightly. They do them pretty well now where you kind of see a screw, but why add a screw when you don't need it? Lock bar inserts they're not needed. Now, ceramic detent balls, that's a little different story. I do wish that was standard. I get why it's not in some instances. I could do a longer video on that, but I do kind of wish everybody used ceramic ball detents because that is something I do see wear out. And it's just an annoying thing, and having to get it fixed or fixing it yourself is a pain in the butt. But anyways, back to the knife. Open construction, blasted. You got these milling marks right here. This is just nitpicking. I don't really love how these are raw titanium in there. I kind of wish this was milled before the blasting, but I kind of get it. It kind of bounces off these other shiny parts. But that's just me. I just kind of wish it wasn't the case. Really big thumb studs here. Sometimes you can use these on Solo Vs. Sometimes you can. On this one you can't. It has a really, really strong detent, which is why it fires so freaking hard and has such a positive detent. You can see there's no play. Like, any wiggling you're seeing is just me moving my hands. It is like precise, perfectly centered. Just awesome. Listen to this cool sound. Really cool tingy sound. I don't know if that came through on the camera. See the lock face in there, completely protected. Dual giant thumb studs, and they completely are shouldered on two sides of titanium. You can see how they just, fit right in there. And that's another reason with the lock face. Gosh, I should have done that as its own video. Maybe I'll pull that out. I bet nobody's even watching this anymore. Talk about that a little bit more. Part of the reason why people think lock bars start to move isn't actually the lock bar wearing out. It's actually the blade settling further back. If you have small thumb studs that are hitting a flat area, it's going to start to detent, and I'll show this better in another video. It's going to start to detent into that, which means that the blade is sitting just ever so slightly further back, especially if you hard open it a lot. It'll start moving back just a little bit, and the blade moves back, the lock face moves up, the lock bar moves over, right? So what a lot of people misinterpret as the actual titanium wearing out isn't the titanium wearing out. It's the blade seating further back because it's not properly shouldered like this. I'm looking at you, Strider. I'm looking at you, especially with the newer ones. That is one of my gripes with the newer Striders is the little tiny thumb studs they use. I like the big beefy ones that they used to have. But anyways, so fully shouldered here. You'll see that in Medfords too. They do that well. This looks way better than a Medford though. Very simple design. I've taken this apart. It's got two screws right here and then the pivot holding it together. Now you could argue, might be a good idea to have another screw over here, particularly in this blade stop here. No, that's not the blade stop in the open position. That's the blade stop in the closed position. It engages right here. And you can see even that is shouldered. Like, man, you don't even need to do that, right? Because there's not a lot of force when you're closing it. You can get away with just having flat steel engage with this. Not a big deal. But he went the extra mile and actually shouldered that as well. So it kind of would have been cool if this actually screwed through and wasn't just a floating pin, just to give you that extra strength, even though it's not really needed. And that's it. Very simple. Taking this apart a couple times just to check it out. And very simple design. Very well put together. Got this nice choil up here, kind of backtracking. Very usable blade. It is heavy. Oh yeah, let's get a weight on this. It is heavy. I mean, it's as heavy as it looks, right? I don't think there's going to be any major surprises where you're like, oh my gosh. So yeah, about 9 ounces. It's a beefy knife. Pocket clip is a little difficult to get in your pocket. You really got to push on it. Upside to that, it ain't going anywhere. So that's just if you like it or not like it. Some people do, some people don't. But it does have a lot of tension on this lock bar, and so it is a little hard to get over the lip of your pants there. Flips really well, despite having kind of a lower flipper tab. Ideally, you want this as high as you possibly can. Depending on your design, what you can do. In this case, they had to put it underneath this stop here to make the knife function. But the lower you put this flipper tab, the less leverage you have against the pivot here, which means you got to compensate by making sure it's super smooth and you have a really strong detent, which this has in spades. All right, guys, I'm done. Wow, 20 minutes, ridiculous. I'll talk to you guys later. This is the Direware Solo Classic. Check Direware out. Really cool knives. Yes, they're expensive, but they're very well done. Very cool. Kind of bespoke, quasi-custom, that kind of thing, whatever you want to call it. And you can actually get them, right? If you sign up for the mailing list, you can get them. If you see that email come through, and as long as it hasn't been sitting there for like 30 minutes or an hour, you can jump in and pretty much get anything there. Like, they don't sell out in a second like some makers do. Now, maybe the one that you're particularly after, if you wait 20 minutes, will be gone, but there'll be something there. In this case, I jumped right on it. They had everything. This is the one I wanted. I got it. I watched it. These were available for maybe 20 minutes, 30 minutes before they sold out. Some of the other ones were there for hours until they sold out. So you can actually get these ones. They also show up on secondary. There's a Facebook group for Direware as well, full of cool guys. So check it out. Check this brand out. Very cool. I'm not aware of any collaborations with production companies or anything like that. He kind of just does his own thing and just runs his own stuff. I also don't know if he's a one-man show or has some help. I would imagine he at least has some help with some of the logistics and shipping and stuff, but I don't know if he has people employed in the shop or not. But check it out, direware.com. Check out the knives, they're very cool. This in no way is I paid out the nose. I paid full price for this. And I paid secondary price for my other one. And I paid full price for the one I got 12 years ago. So yeah, I don't have any compensation, sadly, from anybody. So all right, guys, I'll talk to you later. See ya.